Russia is a vast land, the world's largest country, pictured here along with the other members of what was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or the USSR, that dominated the mainland of Asia from its formation after the Russian Revolution in 1917 until its breakup into separate countries, each designated here by a separate color, in 1991. Still, the Russian Federation, the vast cream-colored section of this map, remains the world's largest country. 3 times larger than all of Europe and larger than all of East and Southeast Asia, including China, India, and the neighboring countries combined. If one looks at the population of Russia, however, what is most striking is the vast open spaces. As this map demonstrates, the population of Russia, currently about 140 million and in fact declining, is only 1/5 as large as Europe and 1/20th as large as East and South Asia, dominated by the huge billion-plus people in China and India. Moreover, as this population map demonstrates, almost the entire Russian population is concentrated in the southwest quadrant of the country, whereas the north and eastern parts of Russia remain virtually unpopulated. The reasons for this distribution of population can be explained largely by geographical factors. As this map illustrates, almost all of Russia, like the second largest country in the world, Canada, lies above 50 degrees north latitude. In other words, in an extremely cold part of the northern hemisphere. And in fact, much of Russia, like Canada, lies above the Arctic Circle. Moreover, as this topographical map illustrates, the mountain chains of Russia lie in a north-south trajectory, as indeed they do in the case of Canada. And this provides no east-west trending mountains to block the spread of cold, heavy air from the polar cap south. So Russia, like Canada, is dominated by the spread of extremely cold air from its northern extremes. Before leaving this topographical map, let's take a special note of the Ural Mountains, which run on this northeast to southwest diagonal, separating western Russia at the left from the vast bulk of Siberia to the east, or the right of this illustration. Moreover, this northern location, while explaining the extreme cold of Russia and the short growing season, is reinforced by the precipitation distribution or rainfall distribution in Russia. As this map illustrates, Russia lies between 30 degrees and 60 degrees north latitude. As you'll recall from our discussion of the atmospheric physics, this is a band of westerly moving air passing around the Earth from west to east. As a consequence, the bulk of the air mass moving across Russia originates in the Atlantic Ocean and the neighboring North Sea and Baltic Seas. As this air moves across the Atlantic, it picks up moisture evaporating off the surface of the ocean, hits the west coast of Europe, rises, cools. As the air cools, the moisture in it condenses, falling in relatively plentiful rainfall across most of Western Europe, and still adequate rainfall in Western Russia, this area north of the Black Sea. After passing over Western Russia, however, it rises to cross the Ural Mountains, which we mentioned earlier, that runs in a diagonal here north of the Caspian Sea. When it does, it drops its final moisture on the western edge of the Urals, and passing over the Urals, almost all of the moisture from this westward air mass has been spent. There are no major sources of moisture east of the Urals. So the entire band of Central Asia, from the Urals to the very shores of the Pacific, is an extremely dry climate, as illustrated here. This accounts for the entire southern underbelly of Russia and explains why only the southwest corner of the country, that is furthest enough south to be warm and furthest enough west to have some rainfall, can support agriculture and thus a dense population. When we look at the vegetation map of Russia, we see that it is banded from north to south. In the northernmost areas, we have what's called the tundra, an extremely cold zone with a very sparse vegetation cover. Moving south from this tundra, which is pictured here in light blue, into the broad light green area that runs across northern Russia all the way to the Pacific, is the boreal or northern or coniferous forest, the dense forest of coniferous trees that dominate Siberia. Only in the southwest, around what is now Moscow, do we find a transition zone between coniferous and deciduous or broadleaf forests. In this area of mixed deciduous coniferous forest, we find the dense tree growth around Moscow that we'll return to in a moment. Finally, moving from this mixed forest zone south, we see increasingly dense grasslands and less tree growth, producing what is called a forest steppe or a forest meadow zone. And then here north of the Black Sea in this light brown color. And then extending from this zone to the east, as the climate is increasingly dried out, the forest gives way to grassland, and we have the broad Central Asian steppe, S-T-E-P-P-E in the Russian version, what we in North America would call a shortgrass prairie. Looking at the pictures of this area, we see first of all the tundra, that very cold zone with limited vegetation suitable only for reindeer herding, as pictured here. Moving south, the taiga, or boreal forest, or coniferous forest of Siberia. Further south and in the west, the mixed deciduous and coniferous forest, pictured here. These birch trees, or deciduous or broadleaf trees on the left, and the coniferous or needle leaf or cone-bearing trees on the right. And then moving south from that, south from Moscow toward the Black Sea, we move into the forest steppe region. But today, the world has almost no surviving forest steppe, for this is an ideal ecosystem for agriculture. And in what is now the Ukraine, or southwesternmost Russia, this zone has been entirely transformed into cornfields, as pictured here, which is frankly quite similar to the corn belt in North America that runs roughly from Ohio through Indiana, Illinois, and Iowa, a former, what you might call, forest steppe transition zone that has now been converted entirely to agriculture. And then finally, moving east from the Ukraine, from the now corn belt of southwesternmost Russia, across Central Asia, is the steppe or grassland that is too dry to support trees, but supports this thick growth of grasses that extends all the way across Central Asia to Mongolia and North China.